Good morning and afternoon, depending on where you are across the world today. My name is Matt Strain, and I want to welcome you to the April edition of Dad X Discussions. Today, we have something a little different, something that I've never actually done, we've never actually discussed before, but we're bringing on a gentleman named Tommy Maloney. Tommy Maloney is a life coach and works specifically with dads who are works specifically with dads who are divorced and co-parenting and working with bonus families and bonus kids. And I will point out, he used the phrase bonus kids, and I'm old. I'm diehard Gen X, 54 years old, and I had never heard that term before. I grew up always hearing stepdads, stepmoms, stepchildren, and one of the first things I said to him when I reached out to him was, I absolutely love that term, bonus kids. It just feels better to say than step because maybe it's just me, but that whole step thing kind of implies somehow less than or implies different than, whereas saying a bonus child or a bonus family identifies them as the special thing that they are. Because at that point we're talking about an absolute 100% chosen family, which I think is just beautiful. But without further ado, I do want to bring on Tommy. So, hi, Tommy. Welcome to join us.
Matt, thanks for having me. I'm jealous of the hair. I mean, this is
Uh,
today's
well,
toupee. So,
well, you can't see the back. We're balding in the back, so this is the last
yeah.
hurrah while I still have it. At some point we're just going to shave it all, rather than be, rather than have the whole tonsure thing going on.
Yeah, I'm having that debate too, Matt, when to get to the point of shaving it off, but I love going to my barber. So, yeah, not ready yet.
Yeah. I'm holding off until the time comes, but it will
Mhm.
come eventually. So, Tommy, I want to thank you for coming to join us. I want to thank you for your time. I did want to reach out and ask you, give us a little bit of background about, how you reached the point that you are right now, where not only are you doing this kind of coaching, but like you're out there doing like TEDx, you're doing public speaking events, speaking honestly to a very specific topic that very often gets ignored.
I guess the backstory, honestly, Matt, is I witnessed my parents' divorce happen unfold right in front of me as I want to say about 5-year-old child. I'll never forget, watching my parents have that argument and my dad walking out. And many, many moons later, I found myself in a rough marriage and my former spouse asking for a divorce. And the first thing that came to mind was, I don't want my son to watch me leave. And so it's been a lifelong journey of trying to be the best dad that I can be. Like many of the guys here, many of the guys in the organization, I started off as a stay-at-home dad, loved it. Um, I have fond memories of fumbling my way through diaper changes, fumbling my way through trying to entertain my son, but I loved it. And because of being a stay-at-home dad originally, Matt, I feel that I built a solid relationship with him. He just turned 23.
Hmm. Oh,
He loves telling, many stories of how dad accidentally threw him off the bed, and he survived. He survived, and many years of being a hockey goalie, he's taken some pucks to the head, and between the hockey and between dad, he's good. I mean, he graduated college. I mean, he's got a job. I mean, um, I am very grateful for the time of being a stay-at-home dad, but I again found myself divorced, and then trying to figure out how do I stay connected with my son when I'm not in that household anymore. The job I've had for 20 plus years is I do consulting, training consulting, and I'm on the road. And again, it was very important to me that as a dad, and as a man, how do I support, my son, and, as he starts to grow. And when I got remarried to my lovely wife, Ann, there were no books about, you're talking in the intro about bonus. Well, the bonus thing came from, Matt, quite honestly, the Brady Bunch, because you never heard the word step in any
No.
episodes. And they were so ahead of their time, Matt. And the one episode that really drew me to the bonus thing, and honestly, Matt, I don't know where I heard bonus, but it was a better label if we're going to
Oh,
label uh,
absolutely.
the thing, and that thing is, step parenting. And as you're talking about, look at Disney, they have the evil step parents. In the movies, you have the evil stepfather. And with the Brady Bunch, there's an episode with Peter Brady, and he called out and said, well, my stepsister. And Mother Brady said, the only steps in this house lead upstairs, and you're going upstairs. And so I really resonated with that because, when you're building a new family, Matt, you want to try and make it an easy change for the kids. And so one of the things that my wife Ann and I said, and we honestly said this to each other, that if the kids didn't get along, we weren't going to continue to date. And
Yeah.
so we were very blessed that all three of our kids, my wife has two daughters, and again, I have a son, and all three of them act like, even to this day, that they are blood siblings. And so I am truly blessed that all three of them get along. Um, and I go back to how my wife and I created the environment. And again, removing the word step, never understood it. And bonus just seemed a happier word.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100% on that one. Like I said, the minute I read it, honestly, I'd never seen that term before. And it literally just punched me directly in the head with this, wow, that's a much better way to say this. That's a much better way to handle this. And it's simple, but the truth is words matter and labels really do matter. Um, and they matter more than a lot of people want to admit sometimes. Which to me is a big deal. Now, obviously, you went through a divorce. You and I had spoken a little bit earlier. I went through a divorce in my first marriage, but it really isn't really applicable in this situation because we didn't have kids, we didn't have community property. I mean, it was largely like breaking up with a live-in girlfriend or partner. And I never had to go through the idea of dating with kids or, dealing with any of those kinds of questions. Um, for starters, when you and your first partner got divorced, did you guys have to like sit down and I mean, obviously the whole custody decisions and that type of thing. I'm assuming that you guys had either joint custody in some form, correct?
Yeah. So the story goes, Matt, that um, I was packing for a business trip on a Sunday. My Chicago Bears were playing, and my former spouse said, we need to talk. And I said, can you wait till after the game? And she just looked at me and just said, fine. And right then and there, Matt, I learned a
Uh-huh.
lesson that if a woman says fine to you, it's not fine. And so, yeah, we sat down. She said she wanted a divorce. And I was headed to California. And by Wednesday of that day, I had the divorce papers from FedEx at the job site. She
Wow.
already,
Okay.
yeah, she already had everything filled out, the parenting agreement and all that. I guess in a good way, she's a very A personality that she already had all the ducks in a row. And unfortunately, I signed the papers without even thinking about it, without even consulting a lawyer, not even thinking about going through any kind of mediation. And that's the one major regret I have, is that I did not lawyer up. Um, yeah, in the parenting agreement, it did talk about, you know, joint custody. I was an every other weekend dad. And then about a year later, I found myself in family court because she wanted to move out of state with our son. And unfortunately, that was a lot of money. That was more
Yeah.
money that I had, maxed out 2 credit cards, had to borrow money from family members. My wife, Ann, was kind enough to loan me some money as well. And long story short, I am truly blessed that the judge in our case, and again, Matt, here's the thing: nobody wins in family court. Neither spouse wins. The kids don't win. The only people that win are the lawyers. And I have nothing but love and respect for my lawyer, Thomas. But it, again, number one, the financial hurt, the emotion. Um, it was a rough day. It was a rough eight
Yeah.
hours sitting in court
I,
that day, and
I can
so
imagine.
so the end all is, yes, I was an every other weekend dad. I was grateful for the time. We were talking about my son playing hockey. I'd played hockey as I didn't start playing until I was an adult, but because I had that, well, I guess you would call it a skill, I got into coaching for a selfish reason, and that was to spend more time with my son, who got into playing hockey. And so that was one of the things that I again, going back to, how do I, still be a dad, not being in the house. Well, coaching my son was one of the greatest things that I was able to do, and spend a lot of quality time with him. And so the end all be all, you can talk about regrets, that you don't have regrets, you have regrets. But the first thing I would say to you, Matt, my biggest regret was I did not lawyer up at first, because again, it cost
Hmm.
me not just the money, but the emotional piece of it
Oh, I'm
all.
sure. I'm absolutely sure on that one. I mean, again, like I said, I went through a divorce. We were literally married for 3 years. And in that 3 year period, I mean, we were young, we were poor, so there wasn't a whole lot to lawyer up over. But even the matter of doing a no fault divorce and just putting together the paperwork in and of itself was incredibly painful emotionally,
Hmm.
because no one goes into a marriage expecting it to go poorly, or at least I hope nobody goes into a marriage expecting it to go poorly. We go into a marriage with love in our hearts and the idea that this is my person. And sometimes that person stays your person, sometimes you both grow into different people, and those kind of tough times happen. Now, moving past the tough times where we're going through the paperwork and we're going through the court battles and that type of thing, the big question for me, and the part that just really floors me to even think about, is I have 2 kids. They're currently 12 and almost 9. He'll be 9 in less than 3 weeks. But the fact is, even having my partner living with me here in the house, and we're together, we still have debates over decisions that are being made for the kids. and having to figure out together what we're going to do. The idea of trying to coordinate these major decisions when you're in two separate households. What advice do you have for the guys that are out there trying to, navigate? And I hate to use the cliche term, but that world of co-parenting, because I really think that I think that that term is a misnomer, because usually whenever somebody talks about co-parenting, they're thinking in terms of where the parents of the child are in two different households. Yet to me, the idea of co-parenting means parenting together, because I consider what my wife and I do co-parenting, and we're married. But I mean, we still have to agree on what we're going to do with the kids.
I have to laugh because um, there were several times where I would get emails from my former spouse after a weekend, just letting me know that I made several mistakes, including one where my son had to catch up on some homework. He had been sick, and so I was helping him. And, are you smarter than a fifth grader? I am not. I'm not smarter than a kindergartner. I totally apparently messed up all of his homework and got, uh, you know, it was not a pleasant email, let's say, Matt. And
No.
so when we talk about co-parenting, it's the cliche is treat it like a business, and it depends on the parents, how you can treat it. You have to put you really have to put your differences aside and focus on the child or children. And if you can, in my case, I can accept the nasty emails. I can accept that only because I just it's water off a duck. I got to move on. Okay, I
Yeah.
screwed up. Thank you. Thanks for letting me know. Great. But when it comes to the co-parenting, you have to put the kids first, and being in contact with your children's teachers is something I was always doing, um, mostly because the one of the greatest memories I have, Matt, as a child living in the burbs of Chicago was occasionally field trips going to downtown Chicago, and my dad as a chaperone on several trips. And I took that as something I need to put in the back of my head. And anytime the teachers emailed saying, "Hey, we need chaperones," as long as I'm in town, I was one of the first ones to sign up. So having communication with your children's teachers um, should be part of the co-parenting. I was very blessed that some of my son's teachers, when he was in grade school, were actually neighbors and friends, and they understood what we were going through at the time, and so they were very supportive to, help monitor, what Connor was going through at the time. And again, if you and your former spouse just, I mean, my former spouse and I could not be in the same room together. We imagine being at a hockey rink, Matt, and that rink is still not big enough for the two of you. And so, again, you have to put the children first. And as long as you can do that, the co-parenting, again, the way I treat it was like a business. Whatever emails came through, okay, I would just simply write it off and move forward. And you're right, co-parenting, it's it's an oxymoron. It really is, because you really aren't co-parenting. There are, a lot of the dads I work with, they still have those anger issues 2, 3, 4, 5 years after being divorced, and it's about what you can control and what you cannot control. I'm a big believer in Stoic philosophy, and that's one of the things that the Stoics talk about is what is in your control and what co-parenting should be about, is just what is in your control and let everything else go.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the hardest things as a parent to do is accept the fact that, as much as I would love to say, I'm in control, I'm not. My parents weren't in control. Um, I can do my best to influence my children to do the right thing and make good decisions. But at the end of the day, I can't force good decisions. I can't force them to make the choices that I want them to make, nor can I force them to become the people that I want them to become. And accepting that is still tough. And as far as the hanging on to anger, yeah, I won't lie. There's still anger on my part, and my ex and I divorced in '96. Yeah. So, it's been 30 years, and there's still a little bit of me that is still a little on the bitter side over that. Over things that happened and all the rest of it. And it's tough. I mean, it's tough to let that go. But, as you said, when you're making these decisions, you have to stay focused on the kids first. So the first question I have is how? How? How in the midst of is it my fault? Is it her fault? How the fighting over whether it's assets or access to the how among everything that is going on, when something as powerful as a partnership ends like that, how in the world does somebody just put that on the back burner and make sure that the focus is on the kids and their well-being? I mean, there have to be some techniques in that. It can't be just as simple as saying, well, this is what's best.
I will tell you, again, going back to some of the guys, some of the dads that I coach, it goes back to those anger issues. And even you, Matt, you're talking about 30 plus years ago, that can be traced back to, honestly, to childhood trauma. So something in your past is still there. As far as techniques, it's simple, but it's hard. And that is, you have to put your differences aside. You 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 can sit there like your example of, well, whose fault is it? Well, it's both parties' fault. You know, you can talk about infidelity. You can talk about not just your significant other finding somebody else, but there's financial infidelity as well. Hiding money. Um, there's emotional infidelity, and you can sit there and play the blame game. Um, REM has a song called Blame. And so, you can play that over and over in your head, but again, it's simple, but it's difficult. And that is, I go back to guys, and I'm going to talk to the guys right now, Matt, and that is, go seek therapy, go to counseling, because a lot of things that you're holding on to are not going to help you. You're not going to help your children. You're not going to help, either the significant other now or your potential significant other, because you need to. Best example is my wife. My wife, she has such a big heart, and when you fly, the safety video tells you, put your mask on first. My wife puts everybody else masks on first. And that's what a lot of guys do. We're fixers, Matt, and we want to fix everything. We forget we have to put the mask on first. And so part of it is taking a step back and just working on yourself. Don't work on your significant other or your former significant other, their past. Even don't focus on, and this is going to sound counterintuitive, don't focus on the kids. And the reason why I say that, Matt, is because you have to focus on yourself. You need to work on yourself in order to be a better dad, a better man, a better partner, a better employee, or a better employer. And so that's, I will fly that flag. I live in Colorado. I will go to the highest mountains here in Colorado, Matt, and say,
Mm-hmm.
guys, you need to focus on yourself and work on yourself. Even in a solid marriage, you know, the maintenance, if you ever were on a, and I hate to use the word diet, but if you're on a diet and you get to, where you've lost that weight, well, it's called maintaining, and you maintain that goal, be it the weight, be it the measurements. But same thing with a marriage, same thing with a relationship. I mean, you don't have to be married, Matt. You can still be in a solid relationship. But
Oh,
I go back
absolutely.
to maintaining. So the one tool, go find a therapist.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that I will say that I look at as really encouraging, I'm Gen X, and I know that
Ditto.
especially as people get older, there tends to be this like dismissal of the younger generations and people looking up and saying, I know the older generations called us like rudderless and unambitious and all the rest of it. And now everybody says the same thing. Now all the Gen Xers are saying that about the younger generation. But I see a lot of hope in them. And one of the things that I have seen that is a huge difference versus the way I grew up and the way you grew up is that, again, I was taught, again, the most hated phrase in the world to me is how many times did we all hear the words man up?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
100%.
when you were sad, when you were hurting, whether it was a physical hurt or an emotional hurt, it was man up, dude. What are you crying? The idea was that somehow showing feelings made you less of. And I find that this younger generation has finally moved past that in so many ways. Um, a lot of the younger people that I interact with these days are just so much more in touch with their own feelings and their own needs and are completely willing to give their feelings the space that they need to exist and happen. Whereas again, in our generation, you just kind of shove that stuff down there until it exploded one day. And then maybe you got help, but probably not. Probably you just went out and blew off some steam and then started cramming it back down again. Um, therapy is a huge one. I mean, again, whether it's couples therapy, individual therapy, whatever it is, get the help that you need. I'm not going to lie. I spent my life struggling with addiction, struggling with depression, struggling with a lot of issues. It has taken a long time, but I've moved past the bulk of them. Like everybody, I still deal with bouts of depression from time to time, but it's a lot more under control than it was. Um, you know, uh, on May the 28th, I will hit 12 years since the last time I had a drink. Um,
Crazy.
and uh, and it's been several decades since I've done anything harder than that. But again, I spent 20 years working as a chef before becoming a stay-at-home dad, and managed to develop every bad habit that chefs are known for. Took me a while to kick them, but we got it all together, and things things work. Things are working better now than they have in the past. You and I were speaking before we went live about the fact that I feel like one of the key things, especially when you're parenting with a former partner as opposed to a current partner, is that communication becomes even more important than it is even when I'm parenting with my wife, who's right here in the house well, she actually just left, but she was right here in the house with me this morning.
Mhm.
It becomes even more important to keep that line of communication open. Um, I, I know we have certain rules in our house that we enforce. There's time limits on screen time and, certain ways that we go about doing things in our house. And I know for a fact that it's not the same way at like some of my kids' friends' house. And, I get that when they go over to so and so's house, maybe they're allowed more screen time. But at the same time, I also know that like when their friends come over to our house, this is the limit on screen time. And I get that your family lets you have more, but you're at our house and that's how we do things. How in the world do you negotiate things like that with the children bouncing between two households? Now, I mean, you mentioned that your son is in his 20s, so you didn't get to completely dodge the digital generation.
Mhm.
I mean, something as simple as screen time has to start a debate.
I love the question, Matt, and especially when it comes to the world of divorce and how do you abide by rules. And so we sat all three kids down at the time, and said, "Listen, here's our rules. Okay, this is our household. This is your household. But when you're in this household, these are our rules. Yes, when you go back to your other parents' house, the rules are going to be different. And it's one of those things where it's hard as a parent to say, okay, we have these rules, but your rules are going to be different. And they're trying to go, but mom lets me do it. And it's like, we get it. You have to, as I told you, I wrote this down, Matt, communication. You have to have communication with the kids as well and have those open, honest communication. You're talking about the mobile, the phone pewter, as the commercial now says. My son, we and this is where I will give credit to my former spouse. We did have communication about when to get Connor a phone. I found it very valuable because this is how he and I could communicate via
Hmm.
texting, calling. It was early on with video calls like you and I
Right.
are doing right now. But he made a mistake once. He texted his oldest bonus sister, and he was trying to be funny, but it wasn't funny. So that's where the rules were. I need to talk to his mom and say, all right, we do have to give him a punishment. And we did agree on something like whatever the punishment was. I think took his phone away for a week or 2 weeks.
Right.
But when it comes to the household itself, you have to have that open dialogue with the kids. If it's something that's outside, so for example, my youngest bonus daughter, she got in trouble. And so her dad said to my wife, well, the punishment has to continue in your household. My wife said, no, that's between you and her. That's not between her and I. And so that's where, again, open communication is so important. And so when you do have those disagreements with your kids, you have to do your best to explain to them why they're being punished, or um, why those rules are different than other
Hmm.
households' rules. So I, we can't. When I say we, you and I, Matt, we can't stress communication enough.
No, no. And I mean, again, just recently, well, I say recently, he's about to finish his second year, but a little over, almost 2 years ago, my son got involved in Cub Scouts. Mostly because his sister was a Girl Scout and we were dropping her off at camp, and he was really upset because he wanted to go camp with the Girl Scouts too. And I explained that, that wasn't really an option. However, there was a group that he could do that with and that we would look into it. And he got involved in Cub Scouts and has absolutely enjoyed it to the nth degree. And much like you said about starting to coach hockey because it gave you the ability to spend extra time with your son, I, of course, got involved as a volunteer with scouting because it gave me the opportunity to do something together with my son. Because, he's approaching 9 years old. Hanging out with dad is getting less cool every day. So anything that I can find that enables us to spend more time together matters. Um, One of the most fascinating stories that I heard um, at one of the roundtables that we were having, where different volunteers were talking about situations that they had run into. Someone was asking the question about what do you do about a difference of opinion between parents when one of them is there and one of them isn't. So the situation was one parent had filled out all the paperwork for them to go to this camping experience. And one of the boxes that's on there is you have to check if you want to opt out of your child doing range and target sports, BB guns, archery, slingshots, that type of thing. And I get it. For some families, that's a no-go. And I respect that. That they're not required in scouting. They're all optional activities. They're not required for any of the ranks or badges or anything. The problem they ran into is that the paperwork was filled out saying no problem, he can do that. And then the parent who brought him to the event looked up and said, I don't want my child doing that.
Right.
And the question was, what do you do in that moment? And again, my immediate thought was, well, I'm going to listen to the one that's there because that's the one that I have who is physically responsible for that child at this event. And the two parents can fight about it later. But I mean, that's kind of a big decision. I mean, that's the kind of thing that should have been discussed between these two co-parents long before they showed up at camp, I would think. Uh-oh. Are you there? Oh,
Yeah,
okay. You
that's
stalled out a little bit on me.
oh, it, and it's tough because you don't want to be judge and jury between
No.
two two adults who can't figure out their own situations, and now again they're putting the child in the middle. So this goes back to my original point. You got to put the kids first, and they're not doing that because they're not communicating. If
Right.
they're not going to communicate because they have animosity towards each other, how's that parenting?
Yeah.
And now it puts you, the volunteer, in between everybody, and that's not fair to you. And so it's a tough call. It is a very tough call because, again, you think you're dealing with adults, but you're not. Um,
Well, I mean, again, I like to pretend at 54 years old that I'm an adult, but again, deep down inside, I still think that I'm in way over my head at this point in my life. And that, much like many other things, I am faking it until I can get things right and doing the best that I can. I have great difficulty believing that there are people out there with complete confidence in their adulthood.
True.
Just that seems like a pretty big ask for complete confidence. But I have my
Well,
moments.
I'll tell same thing, Matt. When I tell people I was the worst former spouse. I was the worst ex-husband out there, Matt. I was vindictive. I was a big duty head. But the one thing I will say, and I hope, is that I was a good, and I'm still hopefully a good father to all three kids. But when we're talking about divorce, we're talking about emotion, we're talking about he said, she said, we're talking about whose fault, we're talking about, well, you're getting more time with the child than I am, and that's adulting, and it's adulting to
Hmm.
in a different nth, so to speak. And so, again, the big thing is two adults that have to quote unquote co-parent. It's not always a figure outable situation, especially if you have one parent who just is not in that space. They're in
Hmm.
a place of depression. They're in a place of the opposite where, okay, I'm divorced. I don't have to be a parent anymore. You go become the full-time parent. You become the mom and dad. I'm out of here. And so it's again rough on the kids. And when kids are put in the middle, we always say, especially in the world of divorce, don't make the kids the messenger. And we still see it. We still see kids being the messenger. And I look at, well, how is that going to affect their emotional growth going forward?
Yeah. So this comes back to one of the things that you actually do now is I know that you work as a coach for divorced dads. And I'm assuming that this is the kind of thing that you do with them is that, you sit down and, how does it work? I mean, do they just sit down and kind of, emotionally vomit and just unload everything on you? Or are there standard like things that you look at where you ask, are there particular problems? Or I mean, again, I'm assuming that you come into contact with enough different situations that eventually you start to see patterns.
Hmm. So the way my process works, Matt, and thanks for the question, is I do send the men, the dads, a questionnaire, and within that questionnaire, we want to hone down what do they want to get out of coaching, and I'm not a therapist. I mean, I've been in enough therapy sessions. I should be, but that's another story, Matt.
Right.
But I want to let them know that number one, they're going to get a survey. We're going to have weekly calls. They're going to get follow up emails from me. I will tell you, I am a huge fan of AI because AI is one of the tools I use to help record the call, and because my focus is just like you and I, Matt. Our focus is on each other. We're having an open-end
Hmm.
conversation. That's what I want with the dads. As I'm listening, and focused, I might miss something. And so that's where I love having AI be able to transcribe. And then I use a bunch of different prompts to look for, like you were saying, looking for patterns or looking for something I missed. One of the things I stress to one of the prompts is I want to make sure that the dad has an open dialogue. And what I mean by that is they're doing most of the talking, because that's what coaching is. Coaching is letting them figure it out versus consulting, where you're telling that other person what to do. And so I want to make sure during our sessions that they're doing all the talking and they're slowly starting to figure it out. But it starts with the survey, and it starts with asking them questions. And I'll
Okay.
tell you something we've already talked about, and that is with a lot of the guys, it's that control. Well, she did this, and now she's dating this guy, and they're going here and they're going there. And it's like, okay,
Or
but
he.
what are you doing? What are you doing? I mean,
Right.
why are you focused on them when you should be focused on your children? And so that's
Hmm.
the biggest pattern I see, is the fact that it, and you've mentioned it, it's the anger issues. That's a lot of it is just the anger issues and the things that they want to control, but they can't control because they're not in that house. They can't control that. They can't control what they're eating. They can't control what TV or how much screen time. Okay, but focus on your house. Don't focus on that house. So that's my process, is to, just learn from them and listen. And I
Yeah.
feel that that's the biggest thing, is just knowing and letting them know I'm on anybody's side. I'm standing next to you and I'm listening. And again, been there, done that, got the t-shirts, all that good stuff. And this is, again, I'm not a therapist, but coaching for a lot of these guys is so important, because they get to see across a video screen of somebody that's maybe I didn't walk the same path as they did, Matt, but I was on a similar path as well, and
Yeah.
a similar journey that fell downhill. But I'm here to help them and serve them as best I can.
And offer options.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, I went through training as a peer support specialist to help people with addiction. And it's a very similar situation. As a peer support specialist, I'm not a therapist. I'm not here to tell people what to do or anything else. I'm here to stand beside them and support them, to help them get the things done that they want to get done, and offer them, hey, these are options of ways we can do this,
Mm-hmm.
and just help guide them in that direction. So it seems like it's a fairly similar concept.
Oh, yes, 100%. I
And
mean,
and and again,
yeah.
you mentioned doing this across a screen. So this is something that you not only do in person, but you can also do this digitally. So because again, we have an audience that spans the globe. From people in California. I'm in North Carolina myself. We have a wonderful guy named Marcel who flies in from Belgium every year to come to the convention. So I mean, we've got guys in Europe that may very well be watching this. Watching the recording later, or may have popped in during our discussion today. So you are available to anybody regardless of their location.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I
Okay.
mean,
And I've got
and
your
I'll
website.
tell you,
I've got.
Matt,
Uh huh.
I love it. I love it. And part of why I love this so much is because when when my wife and I first started to build our blended family, there was nothing really out there to really help us navigate. How do you build a blended family? How do you do this? And so again, I might not have walked the same path, but I've taken
Right.
similar steps. So yeah, I love being of service to these guys.
I will say, as awful as the entire pandemic lockdown situation was, and it genuinely was awful. We were all stressed. We were all locked in our homes. But if there's one positive thing that came out of that entire experience, is that something like telecommunications, whether it's, digital hangouts or virtual dot therapy appointments or virtual coaching, or even something like, Dad X, like what I'm doing right now. All of
Mhm.
this didn't, I mean, it all existed beforehand, but the awareness of it became so much larger, and it opened up a lot of opportunities and access to a lot of people who probably didn't think about these kind of things. I mean,
Right.
I'm lucky enough. I live in, Durham, North Carolina. We're in a, I'm in a major city. We've got, like, well, I wouldn't say a major city, but I mean, I'm in an established city. We've got multiple hospitals in the area and plenty of services available. But at the same time, we've got dads in our network who live in the middle of nowhere.
Hmm.
What comes to mind is, we've got one dad in Arizona who literally lives off grid.
Mm.
Um, and again, he found us through this type of digital networking, um, which to me is just, again, if I have to find one positive that came out of that whole experience, it was the huge expansion of this. Look, I do want to thank you for your time, but we're coming up on about an hour right now, which is always about the limit of what our audience has. Being at home dads, about an hour is about all we're going to get away before you suddenly have to start dealing with other things. Like, for instance, I've got about 45 minutes before I got to go get in line to pick up the youngest. I do want to mention that, again, this is all brought to you by the National At Home Dad Network. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. You can visit our website at athomedad.org. We are a volunteer run and volunteer operated organization. Nobody in this organization is getting paid. If you're interested in volunteering, Dale Van Vlora can be reached at daleve@athomedad.org. He's our volunteer coordinator. He's also a board member and the current board secretary, a job I used to have. Um, thank you for taking over, Dale. It's really appreciated. You can follow us on Instagram, X, Facebook, all at either at home dad net or home dad net. This is Dad X Discussions. If you go to our YouTube channel, you will find that at this point, there are almost 6 years worth of these that are in there for recordings. And it is everything from important, serious topics like this, or last month when we were talking about firearms with your kids, to some of the more lighthearted ones that we've done that included everything from straw bale gardening to making balloon animals with a professional clown, because all of them are parenting skills. Uh, One of the things that we have coming up is that we do hold our annual convention. This year will be the 30th year of Home Dad Con, the National At Home Dad Network's dad convention. And we're holding it in Chicago, which is where the convention actually started all those years ago. If you go to our website, you can find all the information on that. But one of the things that we do during the convention is the Dads Run 5K. um, this started off as a dream, a group of guys getting together running. Now we do it every year. This year will be our fourth, maybe fifth, not really sure. But I think the fourth time that we're going to be doing the Dad's Run 5K. It's a fun run. It's not timed. We do the finisher medals, but the important part is that all the money that is made from the 5K goes into our Fathers Overcoming Adversity Fund, which is a fund that we use to dispense help to dads in need, whether that's because of a sudden illness or medical problem or a sudden family tragedy where somebody needs a helping hand. We're able to help out where we can. Um, Please don't sleep on the National At Home Dad Network's official podcast, Home Dad Chat. You can find them on Spotify or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And again, you can find Tommy here both on LinkedIn at the Tommy Maloney, and you can also find him at www.tommymaloney.com. Please look him up. I know that we have a lot of divorced dads in our community who became at-home dads because they became the primary caregiver because at times they're the only caregiver. And if you need help, if you need the advice, you need the help, you need the support, Tommy's somebody that can offer that to you. So please feel free to check out his website. Tommy, is there anything you want to add before we take off?
Matt, I just want to say thank you for your time. I am greatly, greatly appreciative and I'm honored. And again, as a former stay-at-home dad, it was one of the greatest jobs. It was one of the best on-the-job training I've ever dealt with as a corporate trainer for 20 plus years. So again, Matt, thank you. Thank you for your
And one of the hardest.
Yes.
I was going to say, look, I'd be lying if I told you I spent 20 years working as a professional chef. There were many times that I have looked back and thought, the kitchen was a lot easier than this. 12-hour days and the heat and loud were so much easier than tween. But again, it's just a different kind of thing. Look, I greatly appreciate your time. Again, please reach out, keep in touch. This is something that, we always have new dads joining the community. And I'll keep you in mind for when those questions about, navigating in divorce and the rest of it come up in our forums and the rest of it. I'd love to be able to put your name out there. So for everybody else, thank you for joining us. We will be back in May with another DadX discussions, and information on that should be coming out soon. In the meantime, everybody have a great day, and thanks for joining us. Bye.